play very well and could tell me all of this backwards, and all the way to people who maybe saw it once several years ago, or people who've never seen it at all. So I do like going through with an explanation of what all of this is. And so if you know the play well, please just bear with me on it. And for this one, I want to, I thought, because every time I try to explain it, I get like this. I get a little roundabout. So I have printed off the Royal Shakespeare Company's education website, their version of the plot, because I think it's about as straightforward as a detailed summary as you can get. So I've given you the pictures of all of these characters on the right hand side of the page. If my image right now is covering this for you in Zoom, feel free to move it so that you can see everybody. But please be thinking.
Everyone should be good. I think I've got it all set up where it's side by side for those guys.
Yay. So I'm just going to read this through to make sure everybody's on the same page. So 12 years ago, Prospero was the Duke of Milan, or as they would have said in Shakespeare's day, Milan. So no, if you hear me say that, it's the same thing. Being of a bookish disposition, he withdrew more and more into his studies, leaving the management of his state to his brother Antonio. Eventually, with the help of Alonso, the King of Naples, and the king's brother Sebastian, inveterate enemies of Prospero, Antonio usurped his dukedom for himself. Prospero and his baby daughter Miranda were put to sea in a rotten boat and eventually landed on a distant island once ruled by the witch Sycorax, but now inhabited only by her son Caliban and Ariel, a spirit. Since then, Prospero has ruled the island and its 2 inhabitants by the use of magic arts derived from his studies. His daughter Miranda has grown up seeing no other human being. Prospero divines that fortune has brought his enemies close to the island, and he sees an opportunity to work his revenge. He uses his powers to raise a storm which shipwrecks them. When Miranda questions this, he tells her the story of their arrival on the island and assures her that no real harm will come to the survivors. The shipwrecked travelers are separated. At Prospero's bidding, the invisible Ariel directs their wandering. He leads Ferdinand, the king's son, to Prospero's cell, where he and Miranda fall instantly in love. Prospero sets heavy tasks to test Ferdinand. The king of Naples searches for his son, although fearing him to be drowned. Sebastian, the king's brother, plots to kill him and seize the crown. The drunken butler Stefano and the jester Trinculo encounter Caliban and are persuaded by him to kill Prospero so that they can rule the island. However, Ariel manages to make mischief between them, and they are soon bickering amongst themselves. Satisfied that Ferdinand has met all his challenges, Prospero presents the young couple with a betrothal mask, and we'll talk about what that is, celebrating chastity and the blessings of marriage. He is distracted from this, however, when he remembers Caliban's plots. As Prospero's plan draws to its climax, he vows that upon its completion, he will abandon his magic arts. Ariel brings Alonso and his followers to the cell, and Prospero, in his own persona as Duke of Milan, confronts his enemies and forgives them. In the betrothal of Ferdinand and Miranda, the rift between Naples and Milan is healed. Finally, Prospero grants Ariel his freedom and prepares to leave the island for Milan and his restored dukedom. So, not a lot. Nah. And remember, this is one of Shakespeare's most straightforward stories, and it's still that complicated, but it is the second shortest play. It only has, I think, 11 scenes in the entire play, which is very unusual for Shakespeare. So
it is unusual, but I would like to point out that one of the hi, they haven't seen my face yet. Hey guys. It is very unusual, but I would like to point out that Act 1, Scene 2 is the longest scene I have ever been in my life.
Because it's enough things for like 4 different scenes. You have what is so many like French scenes with French exits and everything. There are lots of scenes within the scene, and you get a long, complicated story at the beginning. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And so that idea, the understanding of the plot that Dr. Horn just gave you is very, very helpful, because you get so much detail in that first chunk that from a production standpoint, it's a monster. I prefer to use French scenes when I'm directing. And then when I'm not directing and I'm in a show, I'm like, I wish someone else would use French scenes, because then I would not feel so overwhelmed when they're like, oh yeah, you're in Act 1, Scene 2. All 30 pages of it.
Yeah.
I'll be quiet now.
Okay, and if you can post the second question on here. So
Got it.
Okay, so while she's doing that, I'm going to read it out, because we are going to go ahead and do this right away and go on to the next slide. So although Prospero is only on stage for 5 scenes, he speaks what percentage of the play's lines? So we have 25%, 30%, 40%, 50%. I love that we had somebody really confident in going in immediately. So, oh, I love watching people vote. This is so much fun. Okay, so if you haven't already done it, go ahead and do this now. And if you can let me know if there are any answers on Facebook. I'm going to end the polling in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so sharing these results, we have some interesting scholars here. So he actually speaks 30% of the play's lines. So we had 5 people who got this right, and I'm absolutely thrilled with that. So just almost a third of the play's lines. And yes, when I put 40% and 50% in there, it makes 30% not seem quite so big. But with this, let's see, with this, oh, okay.
That was my fault. I clicked the button.
That's okay. With this, I wanted to put this list of all of the characters. By the way, the Modern Library and RSC editions always have these percentage of lines of speeches and scenes on stage. It's really always helpful to me to look at all 3 of them separately, because you can get an idea of how they affect the play by looking at all 3 of the different things in here. But he has so much more than anybody else. Goes all the way from 30% next to Ariel with only 9%. That's a huge jump. But what I love about this play is that you then have so many of these being at approximately the same size of a part. So you have a true ensemble feel for the rest of the play. I do think it's interesting, however, that the only female role, and yes, despite Ariel being the name of the Little Mermaid, the pronouns in there, including the pronoun he gives himself, is he. So it's traditionally played by a man, except for in the Victorian era, but we'll get to that. So the only female role in this only has 6% of lines. So as a feminist, I kind of get annoyed about this, but do remember that this was at a time in when Shakespeare was writing plays that you had all male companies. And so boys would be playing the female roles. So, and you would generally only have 2 or 3 boys playing female roles in a play. So it wasn't really a bad thing, because you probably had another boy playing the part of Ariel. But now when we have so many amazing actresses, it hurts a little bit. So I have 2 other statistics at the top of the page. It's the fact that this plays 80% verse and 20% prose. It is generally the more lowly characters like Stefano and Trinculo who have prose. But it is interesting that Caliban, who's considered the monster, who's the native of the island, who speaks verse so beautifully throughout his part. He talks about, you taught me language. And he shows off the entire play in beautiful verse. The other thing to mention is this is the other thing that this play has in common with Comedy of Errors, and that is the fact that those are the only two of Shakespeare's plays. And keep in mind, Comedy of Errors is written in the early 1590s, almost 20 years earlier. Those are the only two plays by Shakespeare that obey the Aristotelian unities of time. Everything here takes place in an afternoon. Of place, it all takes place on the island. And of action, there is one main story going on. So it is interesting that Shakespeare had discarded that for most of his career, and he comes back to it at the end. So I mentioned that there is a masque being presented by the spirits of the island to celebrate Ferdinand and Miranda's betrothal. And so I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit more about this, because this was a courtly entertainment for Elizabethan and even more for Jacobean courts. And so this is not something we do today. So most people don't know about this. I wanted to take time to talk about it. So it is something that they put on at the court. You would not see this in a regular theater. You would only see this at the court. And they showed off. For the actors, they had a combination of professional actors and members of the court. So you might have the queen in your production, and so you want to make her look good. And so both the settings and the costumes would be second to none. So I put in two examples of the set. Here is one. And let's see, here is another. I think both of these are by Inigo Jones. Please note that with this, there are clouds here. You often had the characters of gods in this. And so you may have people descending from the sky in a cloud. So you'd have clouds hidden behind clouds. So that would actually be part of the set. And you would have elaborate special effects like flying in from the ceiling. Lots of singing and dancing, that elaborate set I was talking about. And you'd also have an allegory that would be flattering to the king or to whatever event is happening. So in this one, you have betrothal and marriage and fidelity. In others, you might celebrate love, or you might celebrate the kingship. And good ruling. So each one would have a different theme, but I also wanted to share some of these costume designs from the time period that to me are absolutely amazing. And you'll see the detail on these, which to me is just creme de la creme. This is far nicer than anything you would have on the public stage, because of course the royals would be seeing these up close and personal. So let me go ahead and click on the next screen before we do the quiz, because I want to talk about how masque works now in productions of The Tempest, because again, most people don't know about masks. So you have this scene and directors have to figure out what in the world they're going to do with it. And some do choose to have a traditional Jacobean mask, which is what you get in this black and white picture on the right. This is from Michael Benthal's 1951 production for the Royal Shakespeare Theatre. Actually Shakespeare Memorial Theatre at the time, but that's what became the RSC. And this is absolutely what a mask would look like. You see a goddess on clouds coming in from the top of the stage to bless this union. You see the elaborate set design and costumes. But that's not the way that everybody goes. So you just have to make sure that it comes across as Prospero and Ariel showing off what their magic can do, what the spirits of the island can do. So in the opposite corner, you have this picture from the RSC in 2016, where they were using a lot of technology. So they have the actress lifted up hydraulically from the floor. You have this giant white dress and projecting images on it to show the scope and the scale. in other productions, I love this production from Washington, D.C., right above it, where you have these giant puppets that are so impressive for the audience. The other two, the giant African puppets, you often see if the play is set in a particular culture, they try to find something within that culture to use. So now we get to the quiz question. Accounts of which famous shipwreck probably inspired Shakespeare to write the play? And bonus question, and I can't see the chat, so I'll be depending on Caitlin for this. Where were the survivors discovered? So I'm going to give you guys, let's say 10 more seconds to answer this. If you're on Facebook, please
we've got
write
one answer in from Facebook,
Awesome.
and it is the Sea Venture. So we've got one in there.
So we've got a total of 5 for the Sea Venture, because we have 4 on here, 2 for La Juliana, and I do love whoever totally went for the Titanic. I'm with you. It's Saturday afternoon. Go for it. So let me just go through these. I'm sorry to tell the person who voted for the Titanic, it was not the one that inspired Shakespeare. I'm sorry. The Mary Rose that nobody chose was actually a boat that went down, a ship that went down during the reign of Henry VIII. La Juliana was one of the ships that went down with the defeat of the Spanish Armada during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. And as we have 5 people correctly guessing, the Sea Venture was the ship that went down in either 1609, 1610. I think it actually went down in 1610. It left England in 1609. And reports came back about it in September of 1610, where Shakespeare started hearing about this and thought, maybe interesting. And did we have anybody in the chat who had guesses for where it went down?
We did. James Rowland guessed Bermuda.
Nice. And that is absolutely right. So as you see on this map, it was close enough to Bermuda that the survivors were able to get to shore there. So I don't know if this is another case of the Bermuda Triangle striking at poor innocent mariners. But all of a sudden you get several letters from the survivors coming back to England. The first of which is this one that is underneath the map. And it wasn't printed until 1625, but it was widely circulated in manuscript form at the time. And there are lots of similarities between it and Shakespeare's scenes, both especially with the shipwreck, but also they talk about the fact that they were marooned for between 9 and 10 months on Bermuda before they were rescued. And it was not all shiny, happy people holding hands. Sorry. Sorry to Gonzalo, who has that as his image of the perfect place. Instead, it was absolutely like Sebastian and Antonio, with people plotting and scheming how to get more power. So I definitely think that that was an inspiration for Shakespeare as well. And you see on the other side of the page, another one of these letters that does have a lot of connections, especially with the shipwreck scene in this. And at the bottom, you see the plaque that is still there today in Bermuda, where you can see that. So this is definitely something that everyone would have been talking about in 1610, 1611. So Shakespeare is writing about what everybody is talking about, what's on the news. And I think that that's pretty interesting because, and I'll go ahead and say this before I scroll on, this is one of the only plays that Shakespeare wrote that doesn't have a clear inspiration. Usually he's adapting history plays or adapting older texts or older plays, and making his own changes, making them his own. After all, King Lear in real life, Cordelia won, they lived happily ever after for a while, and no tragedy happened. So Shakespeare's really good at adapting, but this play he seems to be writing from scratch. So all of the things that I'm going to be mentioning as sources, for the most part, are very loose sources that inspire him, presumably in some way. So keep that in mind. So the other thing to talk about, because of course, where was the ship going? To the New World. Shakespeare doesn't set his play in the New World. He sets it in the Mediterranean. But these ideas of the New World, and as there's a line in Twelfth Night where Maria compares Malvolio's face to the lines on the new map. It would be a new map like this one in the bottom right-hand corner that include the New World. And as you see from both of these maps, they're not getting everything right. It's very much a work in progress. And so they are constantly discovering new things. So the idea of just accidentally discovering a new island is not that outside the realm of the possibility where it would be today. So keep that in mind. But instead, Shakespeare sets it in the Mediterranean, the heart of Western civilization, and puts it in this area. And we start with Tunis because that's where the ship that is shipwrecked has been, because Alonso has married his daughter, and who has the best name ever. I love that his daughter's name, the new queen of Tunis, is Clarabelle, not just for cows. So they have seen Clarabelle off, and they are going now from Tunis back to Naples. And as you see here, there are many islands in the Mediterranean, but there's nothing between those two that's on the map yet. So keep that in mind. You also have Prospero, who was the Duke of Milan, and they talk about sending him out to sea. This is not quite as bad as the seacoast of Bohemia that Shakespeare writes about in Winter's Tale, but it's still nowhere near the sea. So bless Shakespeare's heart. The last real place that they talk about in here is Algiers, which is where Sycorax had been, and they banish her because of her bad behavior. And they don't want to kill her because she's pregnant, but they do put her on this remote island in the middle of nowhere. So all of these are connecting to real world place names, but people would also be thinking about the New World and how you could find things there. They would also be thinking about some of the crazy reports that people are getting of the places that these explorers are visiting. This account of people with heads underneath their shoulders always gets to me, but you never know what you might find and how different people might be in other places. And you also have all of these accounts from the white explorers talking about how they were greeted as gods. And so you definitely see that reflected with how Caliban reacts first to Prospero in the backstory, and then to Stefano and Trinculo during the course of the play. So that absolutely goes along with the reports that Shakespeare would have experienced, whether it's in images like these or in travelers' tales, which might or might not be factual. So for this, and if we can go ahead and get the quiz up, it will be after this. I want to definitely talk about Montaigne, because when it comes to Caliban, whose letters are the same pretty much as in the word cannibal, so that's where most people think his name came from, just rearranging that a little bit. This translation that came through by John Florio in 1603 made a big impact, especially this 30th chapter of the cannibals. And this is important for two things, both the character of Caliban, where they're talking about this island. They at last discovered a great fertile island, replenished with goodly woods and watered with great and deep rivers, far and distant from all lands. That certainly sounds like the island that we're seeing in this play. And the good open nature of the people who are native to the island, like the quote you see at the bottom, the very words that import lying, falsehood, treason, dissimulation, covetousness, envy, detraction, and pardon were never heard amongst them. You also get this underlying feeling of worry about other people usurping your power, like this one in the middle, which is talking about the people back at Carthage being worried about the residents of this island and about people joining them. The lords of Carthage fearing, as they said, that in successive time, they would so multiply as they might one day supplant them and overthrow their own estate. So all of these ideas are going into the subplot with Sebastian and Antonio, and as well as what's going on with Caliban. So this was a huge influence on Shakespeare. So now the quiz question: what famous speech from the play did Shakespeare plagiarize from Arthur Golding's 1567 translation of Ovid's Metamorphoses? And I'm sorry, I'm also an English comp teacher, so when I see plagiarism, it bothers me. To be clear, he directly plagiarizes one line and then plagiarizes a bunch of subpoints later on. So I want to be clear about what I'm accusing this dead man of.
I would like to point out that people are changing their answers. They're like guessing. They're like, oh, I don't know.
Love it.
We don't have any. I just saw some that like popped up and then moved over to another one, and then someone else changed their answer again. But we don't have any answers on Facebook yet. Although I do have the polls going on Facebook as well. So
no one wants to accuse Shakespeare of a horrible crime. Of course, I want to preface all this by saying, in Shakespeare's time, there was no concept of plagiarism. I've talked about how he adapted so many other people's ideas already. So this wasn't a horrible thing, but it's still hilarious. And I was not aware of this until I was doing my reading for this presentation. I was like, oh, I felt like I had looked at Turnitin and it had flagged all of these different colors. So,
oh, that makes me so happy. You mean that there was something about this show that I knew that you didn't?
Yay, Caitlin! Yay, Caitlin. Okay, so I'm going to close this now. Let's see. So here are our results. We have 22% for our revels now are ended. 44% for Be Not a Fear, the Isle is full of noises. No one thought the epilogue, Now My Charms Are All O'erthrown, and 33% for Ye Elves of Hills, Brooks, Standing Lakes, and Groves. So any news from Facebook?
No, we didn't have any answers out there.
Okay.
So let's see what it is.
Okay, so I will say, for once, it was not the most popular answer. We had 3 people who got it right. This is Ye Elves of Hills, Brooks, Standing Lakes, and Groves. And so I've tried to put these side by side, do some bold, slightly larger font for the places that are the same. But if you look at this first line of Golding, Ye Elves of Hills, of Brooks, of Woods alone, of Standing Lakes, I'm sorry, I would have to sit Mr. Shakespeare down and have a little talk with him about, well, not even failed paraphrasing. This is out and out plagiarism. So I'd ask him to redo the assignment. And poor posterity would be deprived of a great line. But the later ones that we have from the I have bedimmed the noontide sun, called forth the mutinous winds, I can at least say from this part on, at least to me, Shakespeare's at least doing it better, but he is absolutely stealing the ideas from the original. So bedim the noontide sun is from this very last line, dim the morning fair and darks the sun at noon. Call forth the mutinous winds, by charms I raise and lay the winds. And then we have rifted Jove's stout oak with his own bolt. And there are 2 lines here, from the bowels of the earth, both stones and trees do draw, whole woods and forests I remove. Shakespeare has the strong base promontory have I made shake. And it was just, I make the mountain shake. Okay, we totally give Shakespeare credit for making that one better. By the spurs, I plucked up the pine and cedar. So again, those lines about the trees do draw, whole woods and forests I remove. And then the graves at my command have waked their sleepers, oped up and let them forth. is a little bit better than Arthur Golding's I Call Up Dead Men from Their Graves.
Well, I will say that, the Shakespeare in this is writing in verse, right? So
Yes.
a lot of this is him turning it into iambic pentameter. So, it can be better, but it can also just be like, this is what I want them to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that it might not be better. It's just different. Says the actor who
I
has a hard
apologize
time
to
learning
Arthur
verse
Golding
sometimes.
writing in a completely different meter. And I will say he does come up with a number of other lines like the midnight mushrooms that weren't in the original. But again, we'd have to have a little talk. And so, yeah, I think it is interesting that he went so closely for so much of the speech to the original. That said, I still love the speech. So, the other influences that he has, and I'm just going to talk about this quickly, Daphnis and Chloe, which is an ancient work that had been translated by Angel Day, and they're not quite as bad as that Golding, but there are some places throughout that have connections with Shakespeare. But the story of this, I think you could see Shakespeare getting ideas. It all takes place on an island. You have a girl who's been kept away from the world, innocent of the ways of man, as your heroine. And get this, both father figures are the only ones who can see this invisible power that is getting the two people together. In the case of Tempest, Ariel. In the case of Daphnis and Chloe, Eros, the god of love. So I think that I can see a little bit of the structure for the play coming from this. Next is John Dee. And he is pictured at the bottom of the page. He was the most famous magician, sorcerer, alchemist of the time. And he also was probably represented by the two other most famous plays about magic from the time period, both Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus and Ben Jonson's play The Alchemist. If you're not familiar with what an alchemist is, they are the people who claim to be able to turn different substances into gold. And Ben Jonson has a lot of fun holding that person's feet to the fire and trying to get them to do that. So John Dee was a really controversial figure. He was really in favor during Queen Elizabeth's reign for a very long time, but fell out of favor when King James came to the throne. So it is an interesting person to reference. I also want to mention one thing that I didn't say about the last speech, which is that speech talks about Shakespeare's powers Prospero's powers in such an interesting way, because nowhere else in the play can he do those things, especially not bring people back from the dead. That is some crazy dark magic. And people accused Dee of doing some dark magic. He said, no, I only stick to white magic. But it is interesting that speech is there in the play, because if productions choose to lean on it, they can make Prospero a much more sinister and menacing figure in the course of the play. So in addition to John Dee, you also have King James himself, who, while he was King of Scotland, but before he became King of England, wrote a book on demonology that is very interesting to read, especially along with Macbeth. And he wrote this letter of advice to his son about how to be a good king in Basilicon Doron. And so Shakespeare is playing with lots of these ideas for both. What are the qualities of a good ruler? And you see that playing out in several of the plots within the play. And in terms of names, Shakespeare has several different interesting influences. The history of travel, you get the name Sycorax. Every Man is Humor, another play by Ben Jonson, who did The Alchemist, has, in the first version of 1598, has both Prospero and Stefano as characters. And William Thomas's History of Italy has a lot of the names of the other Italians who were mentioned in the play. So it is kind of interesting to see that. So now let's get to this quiz question. In what year was the connection between Prospero and Shakespeare, which I myself accidentally made, first made? So is it 1611 when the play is new? Is it 1753? Is it 1838? Or is it 1904? So I'll give a few more seconds. Oh, we already got another one. Okay, I'm going to go. Oh, people changing their minds. I love it. Okay, giving 2 more seconds and I'll stop. Final answer, final answer. Okay. So
on Facebook, we've got an 1830. We got to vote for 1838.
Okay, nice. So we have 2 for 1611, 2 for 1753. And with the Facebook vote, we have 4 for 1838 and 1 for 1904. Well, let's go ahead and see what this is. So this idea of Prospero as Shakespeare's stand-in really doesn't come up, at least in the information we have, until 1838 from the work of poet Thomas Kimball, writing in criticism about the play. So he is the first one to talk about it. It is interesting that it comes in 1838 because that will be another significant date for the play. But ever since then, it has been everywhere. You will see lots of criticism talking about this in the same way that Prospero is saying goodbye to his art. Shakespeare is saying goodbye to his art, his writing in the theater. And then in the same way that Prospero says that he's going back to Milan, Shakespeare is presumably going to go back to Stratford. Okay, he's still gonna like put his hand in and write parts of a couple more plays, but still it counts. And so it also comes up in a number of performances, including John Gielgud in Prospero's books. During the course of the play, you see him writing the play, The Tempest. And so Prospero actually becomes Shakespeare in that as he writes the play, which is kind of interesting to me. So in terms of the early history, once the play is written, the first time that is published is in the first folio of 1623. So it is not published in Shakespeare's lifetime. But interestingly enough, and this is why I did this particular image of the play in the first folio, if you can see on that facing page that is blank, you can kind of see through the page to see what was on the page before it, which is the table of contents. So this is actually the very first play that you read in the first folio. And if you're not already familiar with the first folio, this is the first time many of Shakespeare's plays were published, and certainly the first time his plays were published together. It was done by his friends, by co-shareholders in the same theater, and it was done to honor his legacy and make sure people didn't forget him at a time that plays were not really published that often. And actually Ben Jonson had been the first writer to publish collected plays together in this form. So Shakespeare is at the very beginning of that trend. So it is placed front and foremost. And yes, there are lots of theories about that. Some people think it's because this is his greatest achievement, so his friends wanted to put it first. Some people thought because it's a play about making magic, making art, they put it first for that reason. Plenty of other people said, well, it was a really good copy of the play, so they knew they could go ahead and send it to the printers while they're trying to get together some things that were in not as good shape. So who knows the reason, but it does appear first. And this is also, as you see here, the second item in the list, this is the first play that Shakespeare presumably wrote specifically for the conventions of the Blackfriars Theater, which was the indoor theater where Shakespeare's company was playing. So they would do their outdoor plays at the Globe, and this would definitely have been played there as well, though we don't have evidence of it being played in either place. It would have been. But the reason why we know that this was written for the Blackfriars rather than the Globe, I find this really interesting. It is because in this indoor image that you see here, at the top here, you have one thing that you don't have in an outdoor theater with a big hole in the roof to let the sun shine through. You have chandeliers full of candles. And I included this image at the bottom of someone actually at the Globe Theater, where they now have a second theater, an indoor theater of the same style, based on a design by Inigo Jones, who had designed several of those masks as well as indoor theaters at the time. You now have someone who is in charge full-time of these candles. They have bees, they collect the beeswax, they make the wicks, they make the candles, put them together, and then he is in charge of them during the course of the show. I got to listen to him talk a little bit about this the last time I was over there, and it was fascinating. And so with these candles, they burn down. So you have to have act breaks. Before this time, Shakespeare just wrote scenes, and all of the act breaks that you see today would have been put in by later editors. And now we have to have act breaks because, as you see in this picture here, some of the candles are burning down. So you, one, have the danger of wax dropping on their nice clothes. You also have the danger of the wicks that you need to trim because they're too long. And so something might go awry. So you have to have regular intervals where you trim those wicks, where you replace the candles that are too low. And I also love this detail. If you're ever in London when they've been playing shows at the San Wanamaker, they actually sell off the remaining little candles that are too short to get through another act on stage. So if you're ever there, ask about it. So that's how we know. But the first production that we know of for sure is this one on November 1st, 1611 at the court for James I. So that means that the earliest the play could have been written was in September of 1610. The latest would be in November of 1611. So sometime probably in 1611 it was written. And the play is brought back to court 2 years later for James I's daughter, Elizabeth, her marriage to the Emperor Palatine. And so I think I said that name wrong. I apologize in advance if that is wrong. I have lots of things stuffed into my mind. I apologize. Palatine is in there. Elector Palatine, I bet. And so huge marriage ceremony, lots of plays were performed, including Much Ado About Nothing, where you have a wedding going really wrong. So some people think that the mask was added to the play later because it's celebrating marriage and it was performed at a marriage. That's very doubtful to be the case. If you look at the list of things that were performed, most of them had nothing to do with marriage. It was just a happy coincidence. So after that, of course, the theaters ended up closed down for a while, and then you have the Civil War. After that, Charles II comes back from France, where he's been watching plays where scandalously they have women on stage.
What?
I know. So we definitely need that to happen in England now. And it would be even better if we can give them parts where they dress up as boys, where we can see their legs. Just saying. And if we can have a bunch of jokes, they're wink, wink, nudge, nudge, where they say things that they should not know anything about, that is best. So keep those elements in mind as this play becomes transformed. They keep a third of Shakespeare's original dialogue, and Sir William Davenant, you see at the top, and John Dryden put this together to make the best possible restoration version of this play, and it's fun. It is crazy, and it sells like mad. It is extremely popular, and actually, so it's extremely popular. Its original version, I should add, they also add music and dancing, and there's spectacular staging. So the only way that we can make that even better, as Thomas Shadwell does, is adding more music. So, and more wacky hijinks. And so that happens in 1674. These two versions are so popular that this holds, the two of them hold the stage pretty much for more than 150 years until we get to that 1838 date. I told you it was significant in more than one way. So from 1667 to 1838, You do not see an entirely Shakespeare version of the Tempest. You see some things where they try to add in more Shakespeare, but so with this, I want to talk about some of the changes that they made because they're good. Oh, and you can also, the image that you see on the right, I love this in Miranda and Ferdinand, especially, and so this would have been, even though it says the Tempest, this would have been Enchanted Island. But I love that Miranda, who has been on this island since she was 3 years old with no other women, and only the clothes that they brought with them, has the elaborate hair and dress. It is just everything I want to see. So
yeah, I was actually gonna say
yes. Oh yeah, especially that really high powdered hair.
Oh yeah, the full on powdered wig, which is what that would have been. That would have been a wig. That would not have been her real hair.
Oh, yes.
I do want to add in here because I don't think we get to talk about it in the interview, but because this show was originally scheduled to be part of TSC's 30th anniversary, one of the things that we did, our costumer went through our 30 years of costumes and created a large amount of these costumes from other shows. So, you know, my costume as Ariel is actually the Juliet's old costume from Romeo and Juliet, and Miranda's costume is entirely handmade and woven, fabric woven from other costumes from the previous years.
Wow.
Which is going to be in utter antithesis to this picture.
I love it.
I wanted to point it out.
I love it. I love it. So the changes that were made, okay, we're starting small. Sebastian, Alonso's brother, is left out. So one fewer person plotting murder. We want this to be a comedy. We're leaning on that. Let's just cut out the suspense. But Caliban, because we want more girls on stage, has a twin sister named Sycorax, because we're totally recycling the names. By the way, she is not considered attractive, though there's a whole plot where Stefano wants to marry her rather than Miranda. Miranda's never even brought into this, but not because he finds her attractive, because he wants to cement his political footing so he can become king of the island, obviously. So now we get the immortal line to Miranda when she first enters, "Where's your sister?" And so we get the whole character of Dorinda, who, like Miranda, has never seen any other people her entire life and is ignorant to the ways of man. She even doesn't know that people die. So later on, she has a full fainting attack when she thinks that someone's dead. But that is not enough. We have increased 2 more roles for women. We need more. And so we have the role of Prospero's male ward, Hippolito, which we're totally going to have played by a woman in breeches so we can see her legs. And she is going to have never seen a woman because Prospero got a prophecy, there we go, where something terrible would happen if Hippolito would see a woman. So he's raised them separately, Miranda and Dorinda separately from Hippolito. And as soon as he sees Dorinda, he falls hopelessly in love. Then Ferdinand says, there are other women in the world. He declares, and remember again, this is a woman, that he will have all of them, not just her. And then they fight a duel where he seems to die, and Prospero wants to kill Ferdinand for doing this. And so Dorinda faints and is all crazy, but then everything is fine. And they all live happily ever after, including Ariel, who has a mate who comes out in the last scene named Milka, who has waited patiently for him for 14 years to get his freedom. And by the way, Thomas Shadwell, when he adapted the play, he totally brought in Milka to the earlier scenes. So why not? So
we had a wonderful comment from Ruth that said, "Why would anyone want to be the king of an island where hardly anyone lives? King of what?" And it's funny because in the Tempest, not the Enchanted Island, but in the Tempest, there are so many people who want to be king of this island with nothing on it.
Absolutely, but it has magic as long as you have Ariel in servitude toward you.
Yes, and you've got Caliban in servitude, and for all you know, like there's magic can give you anything you want. So I guess maybe that's the point. But yeah, there are moments on the we actually talk about that in the director's interview about people usurping things. So stay tuned for that if you're hanging out when we play the interview with the current directors of the current production. That's a great question, Ruth. I agree with you. Why would you want to do that?
And we had a hand raised. Does somebody want to go ahead and ask a question?
I think that might have been Ruth.
Okay.
If you have your hand raised, please type your response in the chat or your question in the chat, and we will absolutely talk about it. We love having that participation. So if you've got a question, let us know. Thanks.
And it's appropriate that we've had this up on the screen for a little bit longer, as indeed this was on the stage for a long time. So I see that there have been several things in the chat. Any questions before I go on?
No, we're good. Ruth didn't raise her hand, but that's okay.
Okay.
Whoever did, please type your question in the chat. We'd love to answer it.
And again, if you have questions, do type them in the chat. If it's something that's really timely, Caitlin will come up and ask. Otherwise, we'll try to answer all of the other questions by the end of the session. So now what I love is this is so popular that it even gets a spin-off the year after Shadwell's expansion of the musical. And this is the mock Tempest or the Enchanted Castle. I've got a lovely image here of a modern college production. And this is, if you know anything about Beggar's Opera, this kind of anticipates Beggar's Opera a little bit because it places the Tempest in the seedier side of London at a brothel, and Ariel does magic with his spirits who are pickpockets and small-time criminals, and the way that they get everybody to stay on the island is that they plant things on them and they get the police to put them in jail. So we're getting ready to choose a few plays for our next round of Shakespeare Out Loud. I personally think that this would be a great choice, and you can read the whole thing on the internet for free. So if you really think that we should do this one and try it out, please email Tom Parkhill and tell him you want to see this. So from the Enchanted Island and even the mock Tempest, we have to eventually get back to the Tempest. So I have images here representing three of the great Shakespeareans of the 18th and 19th century. First, we have David Garrick with his Temple on the Thames, dedicated to the genius of Shakespeare. And you have him extending his staff, maybe like Prospero in this. But when it came to the Tempest, he added in a bit of Shakespeare to the Enchanted Island, and that was it. He did not go all the way back to the Tempest, so we are not there yet. Then we have in the center, John Philip Kimball. You can see in the title there, he absolutely stays with Enchanted Island, and I love the wording here, written by Shakespeare, with additions from Dryden as compiled by J.P. Kimball. I should say it's still more Enchanted Island than Shakespeare, so you probably should flip those two lines. So again, close, but not quite. And then we get to William Charles Macready. I am so sorry to say that I could not find a single image for this production of The Tempest in 1838. So I was not able to do this, but I did want to give him full credit with the huge portrait because he was the first one. He didn't do the entirety of Shakespeare's play. He still had more of a spectacle scene for the shipwreck rather than including the first scene with all the dialogue, but he pretty much got there. So now only one person has entered on this, and it may be because you are absolutely stymied with all of this craziness. I will say in all of the research I did, this is absolutely my favorite story that I found. So I'm excited to talk about this. Name the two literary greats who attended the opening night of Charles Keane's 1857 production together. Is it Charles Dickens and Hans Christian Andersen? Is it Charlotte Bronte and Lewis Carroll? Is it Elizabeth Gaskell and Thomas Hardy? Or is it Anthony Trollope and William Makepeace Thackeray? Ooh, I love that it's going crazy.
Yeah, and we've got on Facebook, we've got an answer for Charlotte Bronte and Lewis Carroll.
Okay.
I am a huge Jeopardy fan, so I'm super excited about doing these polls this way because I got to start naming the things like categories in Jeopardy and made me very happy because I'm a nerd. But I feel like just the other day there was a question about William Makepeace Thackeray, and I can't remember what it was. So now I want to say that is who it is, but I also feel like that's not right. I have no idea. What is that? What's the answer?
And I was going to say, by the way, if you are looking at this list and think that none of these people make any sense together, I agree. So I can reveal to you that, well, let's end polling, see the results. We had 3 people saying it was Charles Dickens and Hans Christian Andersen, 2 people who said Charlotte Bronte and Lewis Carroll, 2 people who said Elizabeth Gaskell and Thomas Hardy, and 1 person going on a limb with Anthony Trollope and Makepeace himself. So now.
Sorry, we're tied 2 ways. We're tied between Charles Dickens and Hans Christian Andersen, and then
of
Charlotte
course,
Bronte.
I forgot to add in the one from Facebook. I'm so sorry. Thank you. So we're tied between the 2, and yeah, this is not going to help because I don't have a spoiler on here, but I will say we know so much about this Charles Keane production because of the journal entry written by one of these literary greats. It was indeed Charles Dickens and Hans Christian Andersen.
No way.
Yeah, 2 people I do not think about. I mean, especially if you've read the original Little Mermaid.
Yeah, that
maybe the Little Match Girl and some of Charles Dickens things, maybe those, but yeah, I just don't see them hanging out together. But yeah, he was on a journey to England, and Charles Dickens invited him to go out for opening night with him there. Later on, Hans Christian Andersen, like Charles Dickens did with other countries, published a journal of his travels. And so we get information about this opening night. But yes, it doesn't stop there because, and again, this is my favorite story. This opening night made an impression. And you can see these gorgeous, gorgeous set designs. These are not all of them. You can find all of them online if you Google Charles Keane 1857 and Tempest. But these are amazing set designs. It also takes a little time to get from one of these to the next one.
So
opening night.
Can I add in a little theory about these things? So as a theater student, when you're going through school and you're learning about design and visualizations, one of the first things you have to learn is how to draw in perspective. I am not an artist. I am not good at it. But these were actually, specifically the one in the lower right-hand corner, was one of the ones that was shown to us as students to understand perspective, because these things would not have been that far apart from each other, right? So these actual set pieces would have been done in perspective to create this big, long backdrop that looked a million miles away, when really it was like 15 feet, less than 7 feet behind you.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
but
sorry.
We still have lots of things going on in that 15 feet. And my personal favorite is the shipwreck. Hans Christian Andersen actually spends a lot of time saying, well, first of all, Charles Dickens had to explain to me how they did this. And evidently the boat at one point, I think originally it had people on it, then it was replaced with a sheet that was inflated and moved around in the waves, so that when it went under the waves, and the waves would have been wooden boards moving up and down, they deflated it and pulled it down, so that happened really quickly and effectively. But he does take care to mark that you kind of lose Shakespeare in all of this. That is all to say that this second shortest of all Shakespeare plays took 5.5 hours. So if you think I talk a lot, it has nothing on the set changes. So for perspective, a week or two into the production, they shaved an hour off that time just by getting more efficient with scene changes. And by the time the run ended, it was only 3 hours and 20 minutes. They took out 2 hours and 10 minutes of all of the crazy. So I love this production, and I always will. It makes me happy.
That's crazy. That's so neat.
So, okay. I want to make sure I'm not skipping anything. Okay, so again, if you think you've gone over the top, Herbert Beerbohm Tree will see you and raise you. If you were here for the 12th night, he was the crazy person. They installed all of this insane real grass, real fountain and everything. By the way, he was an actor manager. He thought that Prospero was far too boring for him. So he totally, like many actor managers of the time, played Caliban, and you see that image here. One of the things that will always disappoint me with Shakespeare is they actually made a short silent film of this production in 1905, and it has been absolutely lost to the ages. So here's hoping somebody has it on a shelf somewhere in a cold basement where it's been preserved and we'll find it, because I'm sorry, when I see this image on the upper right-hand corner with Stefano Trinculo and Caliban, I want to know what on earth is going on with that. There's a guy with an elephant head and a human body. There is this brachiosaur. There are all of these crazy things. He is a man known for putting hundreds of people on stage. So yeah, I really want to know how this image from the souvenir program translates to what would actually be. And by the way, when I said hundreds of people, it reminded me of one more fact for that last one. With all of this, they employed 140 stagehands to get those scene changes. So I love that even with 140 people, it took 5.5 hours. That makes it even better. So the other thing I want to talk about with Herbert Beerbohm Tree, remember, he's made himself the Caliban, and I'm sure not all actors are this way, but he certainly wanted to put himself first and foremost and last and foremost. So after the curtains closed for the epilogue, they changed the scene again and open to this image of Caliban on the rock, watching as the ship goes in the distance, and him realizing that his life is over because he needed Prospero's guidance on how to live. Yes, you're right. This play from 1904 at the height of the British Empire is absolutely pro-colonialism and saying that the natives need us to help them. Let me just say, I think that this is probably the first and last production of the play that was taking that view on colonialism. I want to just take a moment, and again, this is something where we could have an entire session that was just 2.5 hours about Tempest and colonialism and not be done with it. We could do the same with this is colonialism, post-colonialism with race, and not be done with it. So this is a drop in the bucket. If you are interested, there's so much more out there. This is just a place to start. And so I wanted to mention these 3 major books that came out from the mid-50s to the early 60s. You get Prospero and Caliban, the Psychology of Colonization, by Manoni, from Madagascar, looking at the revolutions there. You get The Pleasures of Exile from George Lamming, who is from Barbados. and is looking at his experiences there. And yes, he wrote even more about the Tempest as he went on, but Pleasures of Exile really looks at how Caliban's language choices reflect this colonial experience. And you get Philip Mason with Prospero's Magic looking from an outside perspective at this going on all around the world. So having so many people read these books really awakened a new way of looking at the Tempest in a mainstream way. And so you get this infused into productions. But before that happens, you get Aimé Césaire writing Un Tempête. Caitlin, I told you to remind me where he's from. Now I can't, starts with an M. Oh,
The Caribbean.
yeah, thanks.
Martinique?
No, Martinique, yes. Thank you. And this premiered at a theater festival in, all my names are leaving me, in Northern Africa. And it's spread to Paris, and it was soon performed all around the world. It's looking specifically at Caliban and Ariel's scenes and their interactions with Prospero. It expands and allows them to talk more about the experience. You also get an even worse Prospero than most of these other things. Look at him. He is more explicit in his racist ideas in this, and he actually decides not to leave with the rest of the people so that he can stay on the island with Caliban and continue making his life difficult, all while Caliban is continuing to try to rise up and gain his freedom. So these ideas absolutely transfer into productions, starting with this 1970 production at the Mermaid Theater with Jonathan Miller, that he did a very similar production later on at the Old Vic in 1988 that you see the image here. And you get really interesting reception to that 1970 production, with people writing about it saying, I am never going to see this play as a fairy tale ever again. I'm never going to be able to look at this play in the same way. And everything from this time period onwards, even if they're not explicitly post-colonial, they, at least the people who are part of it, have to be thinking about these ideas and weighing them along with their own choices. So if you are interested in this, there's so much more out there that I really encourage you to read. And this is post-colonialism, and of course you can use critical race theory with the US, where we didn't have colonies, but there is a lot that you can unpack with all of this that I really encourage you to take a look at. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Dr. Horn, if anyone has any questions in regards to that, they can absolutely reach out to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to put my email in the chat, I'm happy for them to do that.
I will put you can reach out to the to us at the Stage Company. It's admin@tennesseestage.com. And we'll get all of that stuff answered. But yeah, when we were preparing for this, Dr. Horn was just like, there's no amount of time that can do justice to the conversation that is really truly required in regards to this show and colonialism and in a era where we are needing to have and required to have consistent conversations about race and colonialism and white supremacy. This becomes a whole other thing that I wish we need to take time to do justice to in another presentation.
Yeah. And I will say one of the great things about it is there is not a monolith in terms of how this is dealt with. Every person in cast or in the creative team comes in with their own perspective. And so you see a wide range of relationships and a wide range of attitudes from the Prosperos who are even who are in this situation. So just know it's not just one answer. It is the tip of a very large iceberg that is absolutely fascinating. So the interesting thing about it is this is coming on the heels of hundreds of years of people looking at Prospero only as a good father and almost a divine figure. I love this particular image where their hands are reaching out, and it's almost like the roof of the Sistine Chapel, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, where he is so godlike in his perspective. And you actually get so many quotes about how boring Prospero is because he's so perfect. He's so nice. He's so benevolent. He's the perfect father. So people don't want to play him because he's boring. So it is interesting how much that has shifted. And so now, of course, you get this shift in the course of the 20th century. And even before this slide toward colonialism, you had people looking at him more critically and making him less perfect. So that is one of the huge trends for the play in the 20th century. So before we go forwards to the next slide, let's look at this question. The great Shakespearean actor of the 20th century who played Prospero 5 separate times, starting at 26 years of age and ending in his late 80s. And what I love is no two of the performances were the same. They were all completely different. So I'll give a few more seconds for you to choose between Laurence Olivier, Paul Robeson, who's one of my favorite Shakespearean actors, John Gielgud, or Orson Welles. We have amazing people here.
Yeah,
I would kill to see any of them
Laurence
in one.
Olivier on the on Facebook here.
Okay, so I'm going to end polling. Make sure I'm giving you 3 seconds to have your final answer. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we have 2 people here for Laurence Olivier and 1 for Facebook, 1 for Paul Robeson, 5 for John Gielgud, and sadly no one for Orson Welles. I think he didn't live to his late 80s, so that probably ruined this. So rather than me telling you, I am just going to forward to this next slide. So even though Laurence Olivier is the first name we all think of for Shakespeare in the 20th century, his contemporary John Gielgud, who actually acted with him in so many plays and directed him, is the one who got an early start and kept at it. So I was so thrilled to have images of all of these in here, starting with when he was 26 years old, playing this at the Old Vic. I will say it looks in this particular picture almost like he's putting on blackface to go with the turban. He's not. It was supposed to be very Italianate in style. I still don't understand how the turban went with that, but he was revolutionary in not having a beard to play Prospero, and he was revolutionary in making it so critical of him. He was a prickly guy in this version, and so it actually caused some waves with critics and the audience. So 10 years later, when he again played it at the Old Vic, he did kind of a compromise performance where he was still using some of those ideas, this time with beard, and used some more of the traditional things in there. The one that really shifted everything and got lots of notice was this 1957 production at the Shakespeare Memorial Theater, which became the RSC in 1961, with Peter Brook. And when he was not wearing this overcape, and you can see it underneath this dark toga that he was wearing in this with sandals, and he was very curmudgeonly, didn't like people, and so it was much more a Timon of Athens type character than what people had thought of as Prospero, which is kind of interesting, and it directly feeds into what is going on with the post-colonial writing at the time and going towards that type of reading of Prospero. So it all ties together. This 1974 production at the National, they actually had him playing slightly against his will, a version of John Dee, the magician, in this. And then after years and years and years of bugging so many of the greatest directors, including Orson Welles, to make a movie version of The Tempest that he could star in, he finally convinced Peter Greenaway to do that with Prospero's books. And if you've ever seen this movie, it is absolutely insane. He is by far the star of the movie, the focus. He is the one reciting most of the other characters' dialogue, and it is absolutely unique. I teach film. I love film. I've never seen anything like it. And there are a few oh my moments in there too. So if you're at all intrigued, please watch it. It is fascinating and at times a total mess, but well worth watching. So we have since then, and remember back when Tree was doing this, Prospero was boring. You wanted to play Caliban. Now some stars still play Caliban, but more and more often Prospero is a role that you want to check off of your list. So I tried to bring in a lot of the stars who have played this. And I do feel a little bit bad when we're talking about the racial ideas with the play. There are plenty of Black actors who played Prospero. There haven't been any huge stars on the level of these people, and even some of the British people that you may not recognize, they're huge in the Shakespeare world. I think that the biggest star that I found who was Black, who had played the role, was Ron Cephas Jones for one of the theaters in Harlem that I want to see that production, by the way. But I do feel kind of bad having only white men. That said, I think you have all of the major people associated with Shakespeare of a certain age, with one exception. I'm still waiting for Kenneth Branagh to give us his version of The Tempest. He hasn't yet. Maybe he's saving that for being a film in the future. I don't know. Yeah?
I'm kidding. I was like, I'm not.
No, I'm all for more. I reserve the right to completely trash it after I've seen it.
Fair enough.
But there are so many great people, and I will say both Derek Jacobi and Patrick Stewart on here have played the role twice. As has Ian McKellen, who did it for the first time when he was very young. And I will totally give a shout out to Patrick Stewart, because my introduction to the play, I'd never read it, knew nothing about it, and I got to see this George C. Wolfe production from the Black and White Picture in 1995 for the Public Theater, and it was amazing. And I love that they went from this where he was wearing a sleeveless outfit to when he played it in 2006 for the RSC, it was set in the Arctic. So you have all of these layers and layers of heavy coats. Kind of interesting. So I have on the screen a challenge for actors. Yes, my next screen is going to be for actresses. So the quiz question is, a number of women have now played Prospero, or in some cases they've changed it to Prospera. Which of the following actors has not done so yet? Is it Judi Dench? Is it Harriet Walter? Is it Vanessa Redgrave? Or is it Helen Mirren? So we don't have a lot of movement yet on this. Ooh.
I think people are checking it now, and we've got to give Facebook just a little bit.
Okay.
We've got to vote for Judi Dench on Facebook.
Okay.
Let's see what else we get.
And actually right now on the other one, everything is tied. So I'm curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, so I think right now Facebook is our tiebreaker with Judi Dench.
Okay.
We've got a Vanessa Redgrave in Facebook as well. So Vanessa Redgrave and Judi Dench seem to be tied.
So this is where we're at. And well, again, I think I will click forward to the next slide so that you can see who is represented. So actually Vanessa Redgrave was, to my knowledge, the first actress to play this role for a major theater at the Globe in the year 2000, at the very beginning of Shakespeare's Globe. And after that, you get Helen Mirren in the big budget movie by Julie Taymor playing Prospera. You get Olympia Dukakis playing a female Prospero at Washington, D.C.'s Shakespeare and Company in 2012. Kate Burton from Grey's Anatomy and Scandal at the Old Globe in 2018. And my personal favorite, Harriet Walter in the Donmar Warehouse production. This is one of 3 all-female productions that they did where they workshopped everything with women in prison. So everybody who is in the cast is playing a particular woman in prison, playing that character, and it adds so much meaning. I think that this is probably my favorite Tempest that I've ever seen, so I really encourage you, not least because of Harriet Walter's amazing performance. If you're not familiar with her, she is up there with Judi Dench as being the best woman I've ever seen do Shakespeare. She is amazing. So yes, we don't have Judi Dench as Prospero yet. There is a small exception in the documentary Tea with the Dames. They have a montage at the end to her speaking out the "Our revels now have ended" speech. So there's a tiny bit of her doing the part out there. I want more. So let's go from there to Ariel, and we're going to talk quickly about Ariel and Caliban. And again, these are characters that we could go into so much depth. We don't have that much time, and I am aware of the time, so I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but I want them just to be in the back of your mind. And again, you can go in more depth with this later on. If you want to get in touch with me about it, I'm happy to do so. So we start with this, the Victorian trend of having women playing Ariel in these lovely ballet costumes and wings. I love those two particular pictures. And the Henry Fuseli picture where he basically looks like an angel, because of course, if you have a godlike Prospero, you need an angel on his side. By 1915, you get the first man to play Ariel in about 100 years, and it gradually shifts to have mostly men playing Ariel in the 20th century. And actually, Margaret Leighton, who you see here in the 1952 performance, she was a rare female Ariel, but she is her image is one that comes up over and over and over again as you're looking at production information. And I think
it is nice to point out that she's very genderless in this photo.
Yes.
She's very androgynous in that photo.
Absolutely. And every photo I see of this actor in this role is amazing. So I understand why these images are used so much. So you also get this production from Stratford, Ontario. I need to quickly mention that there is a DVD of that with Christopher Plummer as Prospero that I accidentally left off of the slide later on, so just know that that's out there too. And I love this production from Shakespeare's Globe, where you can have this gif of him where, with no lighting, no fancy set, no special effects from film, you get an idea of his otherworldliness from just his manner on stage, and I find that really interesting. So I have to mention this absolutely cuckoo portrayal of Ariel, Roddy McDowall in this 1960 version. I love it. And I will say I've made a YouTube playlist that I think we're going to put on the website. This entire production is insane, including Richard Burton's at times very drunk Caliban. The costumes, it is all crazy over the top with top-notch actors playing, and I heartily recommend it. So again, you can watch all of that if you're intrigued by these insane photos. I love them. One interesting trend in the early 2000s has been Ariel talks about flying, and a different way of flying is doing aerialist activities with this and spinning down and flying through the air in these ways. I was lucky enough to see the one on the left with Kananu Karimi by the RSC at the Roundhouse. That was absolutely stunning, and it absolutely added to the effect of magic in the play. So that's another route to consider. One particularly interesting production was Sam Mendes's production in 1993 with Simon Russell Beale in this blue coat as Ariel. As you can see, this is not the typical image of Ariel that people have in mind, but he, even past the physical, he bristled at being told what to do. And he actually drew the audience's attention in such a way that he became the center of the entire production and his quiet rebellion. And at the end, when he's granted his freedom, he actually spits in Prospero's face. And people were absolutely aghast that this happened. So it is interesting to see, as part of that post-colonial tradition, looking at relationships between enslaved peoples and those who have enslaved them. So it is also interesting to see what you can do with modern special effects to make it even more magic. You have motion capture with Ben Whishaw, where they have him see through as an airy spirit, have him actually going into the tree where he's imprisoned. It's worth thinking about how you can use digital magic to show the magic of the play. I also want to quickly mention my personal favorite Ariel from the Met Opera. This is a relatively new opera. It premiered in 2004, and this production I think is from 2012 by Robert Lepage. Audrey Luna singing the role of Ariel, which is absolutely insane, and I love it. But also the things that she did, and you can see some aerialist stunts in this, and how they have her control the shipwreck is absolutely worth your time. So thinking now of special effects, you have this quiz in front of you. The Royal Shakespeare Company worked with what cutting edge tech company to create live special effects for their 2000 stage production of the play? So we have Apple, Intel, Google, and Sony. I didn't get to see this in person, but I was in town earlier that summer, and everybody was talking about this rehearsal process and how excited everyone was about the technology that they were able to include. So I'll give you a few more seconds and then I will stop polling. How is it looking on Facebook? Do you have any answers there?
Let's see. Yeah, we've got a response for Intel.
Okay.
Let's see if
I'm going to stop polling on here and share my results. So yeah, the only one we didn't have on here is Intel, so I'm glad it got to be represented. So 2 people for Apple, 1 for Intel, 1 for Google, 4 for Sony. And well, let me go on to the next one. And well, I don't have a spoiler on here other than I can say that along with the company in question, it was also the company started by Andy Serkis, who is known for his motion capture performances, including Gollum and Planet of the Apes. It was actually Intel that worked with them. And so Ariel, who you see in the bottom corner here, is wearing a motion capture suit that they've tried to make look like a costume as well. And they had pre-programmed things so that he would be on stage. On the other corner on the bottom, you can see him in the back of the stage, and then the projection of him doing the same thing up on a silk that they lowered from the ceiling. And in here you have the actual actor and then the projection of him on silks that came up in a circle around him to be enslaved in the tree. So it is truly amazing what they were able to achieve at the moment he was doing it. As you see in some of these, there may be like a second lag, but that was it. And if you are intrigued by this, there is a recording of it on DVD that I heartily recommend, because it is a whole other level of magic with this. So Ariel also appears as a harpy to scare the people into confessing their sins. And so it's always interesting to see what a production chooses to do with that, how much it's suggestive or how much it's realistic. So these were just a few examples. Another big moment that all productions have to consider is the shipwreck. How do you represent this on stage? My personal favorite was at the Globe. They took advantage of all the groundlings standing, and they had it moving, people lifting it, carrying it through the audience. So its sails looked kind of like Jaws fin going through the water, and then it came up, and people helped hold it up until they jumped overboard, and then by the end you only have like 1 or 2 people holding it, and it goes back out as the seas calm again. So I can't wait to see what they're doing with the shipwreck for IAMS, because every version I've ever seen is completely different, and every version is good. So we have one more character to talk about, and then we'll talk about the recordings and get on to the production this summer. Caliban. These are some of the more interesting versions that I could find. I really love this photo of James Earl Jones from the Public Theater. This is, he played Caliban there in Shakespeare in the Park in New York City in 1962. And of course they describe him, is he a man or a fish? So I like having the fish skeleton and some scales on there. But you have a wide variety. At one point, they call him puppy-headed. So in the other corner, you have someone who's very puppy-headed. I like the shells embedded in one person's arm. And right below him, this version is clearly indebted to the Cowardly Lion. I love all of it. And sometimes you just use body paint and clay to make an impact. So these are some extreme versions of it. But for hundreds of years, and especially during the Enchanted Island, where they cut his more important lines, his more serious lines, he was just a silly monster. And that's what you see on the stage, and that's what you see in images like this depicting him in a more fantastical way. So you also get this interesting line that was influenced by Charles Darwin and the theory of evolution, where he is the missing link. I particularly love this photograph of Frank Benson, who was in charge of the theater that became the Shakespeare Memorial Theater and then became the RSC. He was the actor manager in charge. He wanted a role to sink his teeth into, and man, he did. We know from his wife's journals that he would go to the London Zoo and just sit and watch the apes and then try to ape their behavior. To be clear, he played this role on and off between 1891 and 1930, and he was still doing physical stuff at 1930. He was hanging from trees by his feet, and someone who was working backstage one night on that wondered what they did with that animal at the end of the show. So of course, this is not the way that it goes for most of the time, but I at least admire his dedication to the craft with this. And one big theme that you get, especially with all of the post-colonial, all the versions that are so aware of race, you get people who are showing Caliban as a simple human who is not deformed or monstrous at all, where it's actually deflecting all of those comments back on the people who say them and telling you a lot more about those people. Often these are actors of color, but not always. Sometimes they're also using crouch stances and somewhat playing into the monstrous idea in that way, but not always. And so I find it really fascinating, because as I had in that quote at the very beginning of this whole thing, all of the different ways work. They work in completely different ways, but they work. Another recent trend is having really indigenous costumes and people from indigenous communities playing the role, but bringing in like the paint and the decorations that might lead someone who's not familiar with it to think that it is monstrous. And I find this really interesting. And a completely different side, this is a version from Chicago, production directed by Teller of Penn and Teller, that was full of actual magic, and they had Caliban playing by these two acrobats who are working in sync to create all of these fascinating stage images to reclaim the monstrous. So I want to quickly talk about film, and want to start with 3 versions that we've actually got linked on that YouTube playlist. This 1908 production that was silent, that did survive, unlike the Tree silent film, that is absolutely wonderful. I highly recommend it. This 1960 Hallmark Hall of Fame version with Roddy McDowall that is just so good. And the animated Tales from Shakespeare, we unfortunately have to link that one separately. It won't go in the playlist because it's meant for children. That said, these are Russian creators in the 80s that, as you watch all of the different animated tales from Shakespeare, many of them are not for children. This one is, but it could give them nightmares, especially this crazy Caliban and the harpy scene. It is intense. I showed that to middle schoolers and high schoolers, and they all were like, oh, I'm traumatized forever. So if you like that sort of thing, go for it. I also want to mention the 2 feature film versions here of The Tempest. The first one is by Derek Jarman from 1979. And here at the end of Pride Month, if you are looking for really interesting queer representation of Shakespeare, go for this one. It is insane and I love it. It has a very Mick Jagger style younger Prospero. Miranda is actually played by a woman who was a rock star in Britain at the time. But it has lots of crazy things, like Caliban eats a raw egg. I made the mistake of watching that while eating dinner. Don't follow that. It also, for the mask, has a crowd of the most camp sailors that you've ever imagined. If you saw the movie with Channing Tatum as a sailor, this is more camp than that. So it is definitely worth your time if that interests you. And then we have the Julie Taymor version with Helen Mirren that has excellent actors all around and some really interesting things with special effects. So,
So the Facebook poll is giving me some issues and I'm not really sure why.
okay,
I don't
we're
know
not
if
there
anyone...
yet. Let me go to the next slide if that's okay.
Oh, please do, go for it.
Okay. So in addition to The Tempest, these are all purpose films. These other ones that are absolutely worth your time too are theater productions that have been put on film. I already fessed up, I forgot to put the Christopher Plummer version. It's from the Stratford, Ontario production. It is also very hard to find. So I was able to see it in the movie theater and really enjoyed it, but it's out there. I wanted to include a note about this Polish version. You can get it over the interwebs because they've translated it in the first place. They feel capable of taking lots of creative leaps with it. It is one of the most creative out there performances I've seen. I love it. It is also R-rated, so putting that out there too. You have a fairly traditional performance from the Globe that also has the best Ferdinand and Miranda that I've ever seen. I love them. They are both equally dopey and perfect for one another. By the way, all 3 of these at the bottom have great Ferdinand and Miranda pairings. The middle one is the one that I mentioned with Intel as a co-partner. From the RSC, it's great, but my favorite, as I mentioned before, is this version with Harriet Walter, all-female cast, where they infuse it with the prisoner stories, and it's absolutely wonderful. It also has the best rave in the middle with Ariel songs, so it has something for everyone. It's wonderful. Okay, so now
we do have a comment from the our wonderful Andrew Peru, who is watching the show. He's actually from Ontario, so he's very excited that the wonderful Ontario.
I apologize to you and all Canadians.
But he says that Stratford has a streaming service that has 2 versions of The Tempest available on it, including Plumbers. So if you're looking for that, there's some helpful information for those of us in the Zoom hanging out.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. And I will say, it can be kind of hard to find your own copy of these. At the bottom one, hi, I have all of these. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to Tennessee Stage and we can talk. But if you have connections to Pellissippi State, and I assume probably UT as well, we have an online database called Drama Online that is streaming all 3 of these at the bottom. So you can watch them through that. So now let's get to the very last quiz question. Which of the following movies is not connected with Shakespeare's Tempest in some way? Is it Prospero's books? Okay, we all figured that one out. Forbidden Planet, Hunky Dory, or Blast of Tempest. It is almost even with this on the Zoom poll. I'm curious to hear about the Facebook.
Facebook is not being very nice to me, so it's not letting me do the thing. So that's all right. So I'm gonna post the question in the chat on Facebook, and then say that our answers available are Prospero's books, Forbidden Planet, Hunky Dory, or Blast of Tempest. So if you're hanging out on Facebook with us, oh, there it goes. Now it's up. Of course it is.
Yay! Now that you typed
so you can see that. Give it an answer. Let's take a look at it. But we don't have any answers at the current moment, I don't believe. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and reveal what people have posted here. So obviously nobody's gone for Prospero's books. Okay, 2 for Forbidden Planet, 4 for Hunky Dory, and 3 for Blast of Tempest. So has anything come in while I was talking? Sorry, yeah, we've got a response for Hunky Dory. Okay, but that makes it 5. I am not surprised. So now let me go on to reveal the answer. And the answer is, well, I totally cheated because I put in the answer films. Everything on the list is related to Tempest, but Blast of Tempest is actually an anime series that lasted 2 seasons and has about 22 episodes. So it technically is not a film. Cheater, pumpkin eater. Hunky Dory is about teenagers putting on a production of the Tempest and set in the 70s. You also get Forbidden Planet, one of the most famous sci-fi films from the 50s that has Prospero projecting his unconscious to become monsters in that. And Leslie Nielsen, the great Leslie Nielsen in the Ferdinand role. You have the great production of the opera from the Met Live, no longer alive, on there that I heartily recommend. John Cassavetes starred in this in Paul Mazursky's version from the mid-80s that updates it to modern times, with Jenna Rollins being Antonia, who betrays him. So he has a breakdown and goes on an island in Greece, and Molly Ringwald, before she was famous, is his daughter. It has slightly painful performance by the amazing Raul Julia. I blame the direction, I'm sorry. So that leaves 2 that I really recommend, and both of these are actually available in full on the YouTube playlist. Shakespeare Behind Bars is a documentary where a company went in and helped prisoners to put on a production of The Tempest. And with all of these ideas about being imprisoned, about forgiveness, it really, really resonates, and I cannot recommend that highly enough. And then there is the TV movie that modernizes the language and is set in the Civil War with Peter Fonda. It has some great actors. It has Katherine Heigl, and it has Michael Perrineau, who was so great in Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet as Mercutio, as Caliban in this. I blame the script. It is, okay, let me put it this way. If you like Sharknado, if you like the terrible movies in the world, if you like Mystery Science Theater 3000, watch this movie. It is there for those purposes. Otherwise, it is a TV movie. It can be amusing, but yeah, view at your own discretion. So now, I thought it would be good for me to wrap up this part with John Gielgud, who we now know is so identified with this. Speaking the epilogue, I will say this is one of my favorite pieces in all of Shakespeare. Caitlin and I have been going back and forth about it because she doesn't like it. That's okay. I absolutely love it because it is a play that underscores all of the themes of the play while also asking for applause with an elaborate metaphor.
But to me, it's one of the best pieces of writing in all of Shakespeare. So Caitlin, we can agree to disagree, but I thought John Gielgud should get the last word.
Oh, you'll need to share your audio, Dr. Horn.
I did. I clicked.
There we go. It's off there. I just didn't hear it. I'm sorry. Play it again.
Okay.
And what strength I have is mine own, which is most faint. Now 'tis true, I must be here confined by you, or sent to Naples. Let me not, since I have my dukedom got, and pardon the deceiver, dwell in this bare island by your spell. But release me from my bands with the help of your good hands. Gentle breath of yours my sails must fill, or else my project fails, which was to please. Now I want spirits to enforce, art to enchant, and my ending is despair, unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself, and frees all faults. As you from crimes would pardoned be, let your indulgence set me free.
And that's, sorry, I gave you the end of Prospero's books. So like Tree, after the epilogue, we've closed the curtain. I'm coming back on and letting you imagine what you think Caliban does after everybody else leaves, or does he hop on the ship and find better people around than Prospero? It's up to you. So thank you for bearing with me on the history of the play. Again, this is only the tip of the iceberg, and there's so many other fascinating routes to look at. But hopefully this will help you get started. And now I can't wait to hear what Caitlin has to share with this interview with the directors and the scene from the production.
Yeah, absolutely. So while I'm getting that ready, we've still got some people hanging out here, but we definitely have a couple of people hanging out online. Thanks for sticking around with us. We only got about 30 more minutes and then we'll be done. So please stick around and hear about the next show. So this season of Shakespeare Off the Square opens July 8th and runs through August 8th. Our production of The Tempest opens on July 9th. So it is Friday night. You can get your tickets at imes.org/Shakespeare. So if you'll check that out, you can get your tickets there. Tickets are $15. And because we are still in a pandemic, we are following social distancing requirements. We are outside, which is wonderful, but you are going to want to go ahead and get your tickets because there will be nights where it sells out and we want to make sure that everyone who wants to see it sees it. So please do that. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to share a video and a interview from the directors. The first thing you'll see is them introducing themselves, and then you'll hear me asking them questions in the background. I am not on camera because we did this in the middle of a rehearsal. And I have been running around playing Ariel and do not look camera worthy. I'm only slightly vain. I'm an actor. What do you want? So do apologize for the sound quality of that. We did this in the Mayberry Hazen house. We want to give a quick shout out to Mayberry Hazen. If you are in local Knoxville and you do love history, please visit the Mayberry Hazen house and you can learn some wonderful history that is great Knoxville-based history here, and they've been wonderful to let us do our rehearsals there outside as to keep everyone safe. And for anyone else who is wondering, all of our cast is vaccinated, and we are rehearsing outside so that we can ensure that everyone stays safe during this pandemic. So I'm going to share this really quick. Put that down. And I appreciate everybody. When you have questions, please take time to ask them in the chat and I will answer them in any way, shape, or form that I can. If it doesn't answer it there in the video. And I'm going to change my microphone output so you guys can hear it better and hear.
I'm Jennifer Aldridge, and I am, as you said, co-directing with Tom. And let's see, I started with the company in 2007, which, by the way, was the last time we did the Tempest.
Oh, that's great.
That was my very first show.
That's wonderful. And Mr. Parkhill?
I'm Tom Parkhill, and I've been with the company since 1989.
So that would be when you started the company, is that correct?
That would be when I started the company.
Before that, there was no company.
Yes. So Tom being
With a few other folks.
yeah, the founding artistic director.
Yes.
Correct. Wonderful. So the last time we did the Tempest was in 2007.
That's right.
Tom, did you direct that show? Were you in that show?
A woman named Casey Sams, who's a professor at the University of Tennessee, directed that show. And I was not in it. Terry Weber played Prospero.
That's right.
Oh, great.
And it was a very cool production on Market Square. That was about our 4th year on Market Square, maybe the 5th. And it was a fun summer. We put Caliban on stilts.
Oh, I remember that. That was
So it was
very exciting. I was the stage manager, and all I wanted to do was walk around and hold him up like this. I was so afraid he's going to fall over.
But he was an excellent stilt walker.
He was a great stilt walker. He did a wonderful job.
Yeah, I've looked at pictures of that, and I'll probably like. Last time we've done the Tempest.
That's a really interesting question. I mean, the beauty of the Tempest is that it has a lot of different ways you can look at the different characters. You know, whether in that production, for example, Ariel was played by a lovely actress who was, I think, an opera singer. I know that she had a very operatic voice. So her magic was in her vocalizations, and that's how she really depicted who she was. As opposed to this year, where our wonderful Ariel has so much beauty and movement and really depicts the air in that fashion. So it's you can take each one of the characters, and there's such a depth to them that you can really show them in a lot of different ways to make the show interesting and new every time we do it.
Absolutely. And I am not telling her to say these things about me. We won't make any bits about the fact that I'm the one playing Ariel. But yeah, so I didn't tell her to say that. Those are her characterizations. Tom, why don't you share something that you feel is a little different about this production versus the last one?
Well, coming in on what Jennifer was saying, our goal in this one is to have a very movement-oriented show. The last show was a much more vocal oriented show, although Caliban on stilts was pretty darn physical.
Yeah.
And it was pretty cool. But overall, it was not as fluid in motion as we're trying to create this year. So we're doing a lot of things with. We're doing a very non-representational show as well. We're not trying to have super realistic props or make our island look particularly like an island. It's sort of an island in space, island in its own world, and we're doing as much as we can physically and with movement, not exactly dance, but in stylized movements and using visuals, cloths, and things to create movement in the air, movement. So it's a movement.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for the history of the show, I mean, the way that it's been done since the time that Shakespeare first put it up, I think that there, one of the things that Jennifer Dr. Horn will talk about is the history of the show. Is there anything in this production that might tie to the historical way that the show has been done that you might know of, Tom, the fountaining knowledge of, the burgeoning knowledge of Shakespeare?
No, the only historical thing that it ties into really is that we are stealing some things that we ourselves did with it in 1997, the first time that we did the Tempest. This is the third time we've done the show. So, but we haven't reached back into theatrical history, and that's something that I've always kind of avoided, really. In a lot of Shakespeare productions, a lot of the ways that Shakespeare is presented, especially in British theater, I think there are traditions of how certain things in certain shows are done. And audiences who go to Shakespeare a lot want to see those things done in this way. And I have always sort of resisted that here. I just think, we're not really trying to recreate what 40 other productions of the show have done in the last 150 years. We're trying to figure out how we make this a living, breathing, new thing today. And how is this production just this production and not something that has ever been done before? Although, belying that, I am stealing some bits from our first production in 1997. But I don't think anyone is as old as me and will possibly remember that.
Well, maybe our Prospero, who has been with the company since 1990, Greg Conkleton, am I right?
92.
92, there we go.
So he might have seen that production. And I know that Dr. Horn saw that production also.
But the nice thing about it, though, is I like having that opportunity to modernize it too, and to make this show while staying true to the intentions and the writing of Shakespeare, but to also make it something that a modern audience can really understand and appreciate. A good example of that is our Miranda. And I know Miranda was theoretically Shakespeare's perfect woman. And a perfect woman in Elizabethan times is not a perfect woman in 2021. So making her more like somebody that you might have met today under, of course, very unusual circumstances. But nevertheless, she's real. She's not some image or of womanhood that was held up, several hundred years ago. She is a real person that is very relatable. And I think that's some of the advantages of not drawing everything from the way things have been accomplished in the past, but looking at what do we need and what messages do we want to really examine in today's world.
And another interesting thing with Miranda, Miranda's usually played as a young woman, but the math of the play is that she is 15 years old. So although our actress is not 15 years old, she's doing a magnificent job of playing the attitude of a 15-year-old in the way that she relates to her dad and her in what is going to be her first boyfriend. I usually see Miranda played older. And so we're having a lot of fun creating a Miranda who really kind of acts like a 15-year-old.
Yeah, and Hayden Hall, the actress playing, this is her first summer doing the full 2 shows in rep, but some of our viewers might remember her if they came to see Our Much Ado About Nothing. She played simultaneously Leonardo and Hero and did a wonderful job. So that's a really exciting thing to see and get a chance to hang out with her this year.
She played father and daughter in the same scene.
Yes, walked out of one character and into another. Hopefully, I believe I have some pictures of that, so hopefully I'll be able to show that the goers of Shakesology today some of those things. So my final question is, when you guys are deciding on the shows that you want to do, this show was meant to be done in 2020, and it was chose during 2019. What is the difference? Is there a difference between 2020 and 2021, the show that you had planned to do and the show you're doing now?
There are some differences, but essentially we are doing the idea that we were working toward in 2020. The difference is that as we were preparing for the show over the course of the past year, we had to take into account that we were not sure what this summer would be like. And so we pared the cast size down a bit. And we were planning for 2020 to find dancers and have a much more, I was talking about how we were working toward doing a movement oriented show. And we really wanted to do even more of that with a core of dancers that were also part of the show and weaved in and out throughout the play. And we did not keep that idea this year because we just didn't want to add 5 or 6 more people into the mix. And we had originally pared the cast down to an even smaller size. And as things have opened up a little bit this spring, we went ahead and added a couple of people back in so that we have a more full cast, but we're not doing as complete a show with dancers and all of the movement ideas that we had been working on for 2020. So it's still, it was still a lot of stuff with flow and movement and stylized movement, but not to the full extent that we've been thinking about doing had we done the show for our, what would have been our 30th anniversary production.
Yeah, so our full-size cast is how many for the show? 18?
Our full cast are usually 16 to 18, something like that.
And we are 11, correct?
11 for 12th night, but we added our interns, so we have 14 now in the Tempest. But it would have been more last year, and there would have been extra people as well.
Absolutely, but we did. So for those of you who attended our first Shakesology and were able to hear about 12th night, that was one of the things we didn't get to talk about. Was that 12th night is a truncated cast. To the point where our, Malvolio and our Orsino are being played by the same actor. Are there any casting choices that you guys made in this truncated cast that might be creative or different? The answer could be no. I don't know the answer to this. I think I'm asking a question I don't know the answer to.
Well, we are using, for the most part, the cast that was cast for 2020. And that was an interesting cast because in our auditions for that summer, we did not have many men come to the auditions, and we had a lot of women come to the auditions. So we have cast a lot of women. We like to use women in roles that are not traditionally cast as women. That's something as a company we do, but we went a little farther even than we are apt to do here because we had a lot of women audition, and so we had, well, we'll use them.
Yeah, they're great.
So, so one thing we're doing, particularly that is a twist, is that we are playing Gonzalo, who is the older person from the court of Milan that has was befriended Prospero and helped Prospero escape with his magic and his books and all of those things, is being played by a woman, and a wonderful African-American woman named Larissa Carrera Spencer. And so that gives us a chance. I like to play with, Jennifer and I both, I think, like to play with in these plays that are not tragedies in which people don't die. We like to play with connections with people. Yes. So we are sort of, it's kind of subtle because it's really not a text. We're kind of putting it on.
We're just having fun with it.
But we're playing that Gonzalo and Prospero, maybe,
have a potential future.
Yeah, maybe they were kind of sweethearts once upon a time, and so that's just a twist that is subtle. It's not going to hit anybody in the head. They're not going to walk out and say, "Wow, Gonzalo and Prospero are going to get married." But
12 years to ponder and to miss one another.
but we like to do stuff like that with the show. So that's a pretty much of a twist on a casting.
And the beauty too of having, I love every year the casts bring different skill levels to the table. And so finding out what musical instruments people are playing is another just fabulous opportunity for us to take this play to different levels that perhaps weren't available, a year and a half ago. We may not have had somebody who could play the trombone in the dramatic fashion that it will be played, and they're just taking advantage of some of the opportunities that the actors and the skill sets that they're bringing to the table. A lot of fun.
We have a trombonist in the cast, so we got a trombone in the show.
Absolutely. And then we're moving to IMES this year. So this year we won't be on the square. We will be at IMES Nature Center. And the show does have tickets. So for everyone who's paying attention and watching, you do need to go ahead and get your tickets now. But being at IMES presents a fun or a strange thing to do with music, because generally when we're on the square, we play music in order to let everyone know that we're starting. So are we going to do some music this year?
Absolutely. It would not be a Tennessee Stage Company production Shakespeare on or off the square. No matter where it is, there's always got to be music because it just enhances the show. besides providing a practical service of letting people know that when things are getting ready to start and when they should be coming back. But also the song selection is very specific to enhance either the mood or the drama of the show that is being performed.
Absolutely. And what's the theme of the music this year?
It's a tempest. So we've got songs about storms,
water, gales, and in Twelfth Night, it's just my thing. But when an artist I really love dies, we always do something by that artist. And of course, we lost John Prine to the COVID pandemic, so we just chose some John Prine songs that we thought would be fun. And it's funny, I was actually going to let the music go for Imes. So I was thinking music was a Market Square thing. We may not take that with us to Imes. But are you crazy?
Yeah.
And so I got roundly shouted down on the no music idea. So we've got some really fun songs with trombone, I might add.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that's all of my questions. Do you guys have anything you want to add? You want to make sure the audience knows about the shows or about this production in particular?
It's a fun production. There is something in there for everyone. If you like comedy, it's there. If you like romance, it's there. And that's the thing that makes The Tempest such an interesting place, just because it has so many different elements. And it has the magic. So those of you who are like me, who just geek out over the entire magical concept, it's there.
If you like intrigue,
yes.
Murderous intent.
There's a murderous intent all over this show. I actually didn't realize how many murder plots there were. Even having read it, I'm standing on stage and I was like, oh, there's another one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much. We are going to get back to rehearsal. So okay. I'll try to cut that, but it's not gonna happen.
It's right. Potato chips can fly in every interview.
Yes, I have to go with potato chips. We're gonna get back to rehearsal, so just say bye to the Shakesology viewers, and thank you guys so much for taking the time.
Thanks for being here this afternoon.
We look
hope
forward
you
to being
enjoyed
here.
it.
Yeah.
Bye. Okay, everybody. So that is the, let me stop my screen share for a second. So that is the interview with the directors. Do we have any questions from the audience or anyone hanging on Facebook? I apologize if you said something to me on Facebook during that. I was unable to see it because I was sharing my screen. Yeah, if you've got, anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to add or throw in there? While we're waiting for that, I will say that if you are looking for tickets, again, the website is www.iams.org, and that looks like AJAMS, IJAMS.org/Shakespeare. So please come and check us out there. Let me see. So while you guys are thinking up questions, or comments you would like to make. What were you going to say, Jen?
I have one. I'm curious. We talked a little bit about the mask and how different productions do it, and some abandon what Shakespeare wrote completely. What did you guys choose to do?
So we abandoned what Shakespeare wrote completely.
That's fine.
So
I'm not critical of that at all.
Right. So as I said, in another one of the other things, I apologize. In that video, it says, like, I hope that I can show some pictures during the interview. And I didn't get to do that because we filmed this on Thursday, and I am in both shows and I'm wearing lots of hats. And so I did not get to edit the video the way that I wanted to, which is unfortunate, but that's okay, because that means if you check us out on Instagram, you'll be able to see the pictures that I was discussing during that interview process. And I would love for you to check us out there. And during that, one of the other things that I did was that I am the movement director for the show. So the fabric usage that Tom and Jennifer talk so much about, the way that we're doing the storm and the way that we're doing the mask are all using fabric. So we do entertain the bridal couple, the newly betrothed Miranda and Ferdinand, played by Hayden Hall and William John. but we do it with fan veils. So I am a dancer performer, have been for about 15 years now. Have an alter ego that some of you might know about. Now everyone else is going to go Googling it. But I have worked as a dancer and a movement director for a very long time. And so one of the things when we decided to do this show was that I came and said, hey, I've got a great idea. Why don't we utilize the use of fabric? We're outside these shows that are outdoors. For those of you who don't know, we on Market Square, we're able to build a set, and then we have to truck the sound and all of that in and out every night. But at IMS, we actually have to truck everything out in at night. So, and bring it back out. So the flats, the set, everything has to be mobile. And as a result of that, one of the things that I pointed out that would be great to do would be to utilize fabric to create different drapings for both of the shows, and to also be used as props. That was not the show in the movement of fabric and the movement of bodies makes a lot more sense when you're less focused on the realism of it, because it is a show with a lot of magic. So what I'll show you now is an example of that. This is a very, very short clip. It is from the show. This was actually taken the day that we did this interview. So some of you will see why I was like, I don't want to be on camera. I actually told Jennifer in the chat privately, I was like, do we have to show it? Because it's not very good quality. And by that, I mean, I am very sweaty and hot. So is everyone else. So in this, you're going to see Joe Casterline playing Caliban. Our Stefano and Trinculo, which is Kayla Burnham and Rain Palmer. And then myself playing Ariel. And it's a very short clip. The thing that's happened preceding is that Caliban has said, hey, you know what? I'll let you be my master and lord if you kill my current one, Prospero, because he's a jerk and I don't like him. And Ariel says, okay, we'll see about that, if that's what you think is going to happen. So you'll hear a little bit of singing from me drawing the crowd in and out. For those of you who come see the show, I encourage you to see it multiple times, because much to my own chagrin, I don't ever sing the same thing twice. So let me pull that up, and that's the same thing. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen and we'll show that as well. Let's see. No. Oh, and I apologize. I once again need to change my sound output so you guys can hear.
Excellent. Give me thy hand. I'm sorry I beat thee, but while thou livest, keep thy good tongue in thy hand. Within this half hour, if he is faithful, wilt thou destroy him then? Aye, on my honor.
This I will tell, master.
What is that? Be not afeard. For the isle is full of noises, sounds, sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. This will make a brave kingdom for me, where I shall have my music for nothing. When Prospero's destroyed, by and by, I remember the tale.
Sound is going away. Let's follow it and after do our work.
Lead, monster. We'll follow. What shall we do with the drunken monster? What shall we do with the drunken monster?
So there some of the things that you saw that that I'm sure Dr. Horn will now want to comment on, because it's the first time she's seen that. You'll see there I have fan veils. That's traditionally a belly dance prop. I am certain that all of my belly dancer friends are now going to come back and tell me that I'm crazy and insane. Hopefully that is incorrect, but that's okay. Those are a belly dance prop that is used, and basically it's a hand fan. A lot of I know that there are a lot of it gets used a lot in Asian, in different forms of Asian dance. So it's all over the map. I'm sure I really now realize I should have checked on that a little harder, done my own research, but I didn't. I just know that's where I picked it up from. So I picked it up as a dancer from watching all of my belly dance friends, and some burlesque dancers that I know that use those fan veils as well. and have bought several sets of them. They're used all over the place in the show, and they are often a lot of times used to indicate magic. So that's one of the ways that we've done to indicate the magic. And the mask is performed with several people using those fans. The other thing that you can point out from that production as well, Jennifer, I don't know if you want to jump in on this one, but there you can see our Caliban. So that's Joe Casterline, for those of you who have come to see us a whole lot out on the square. Joe is in that crunched, like, you know, hunching thing. And I'm certain that there is at least one picture you showed that is exactly some actor doing that.
David Troughton, I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that Joe is not the kind of person to get on the internet, which means that just multiple actors have read, and I mean, being honest, like Joe's the kind of person who's not going to look at things because he's going to, you know, whatever he chooses to do, but that's a body thing that he came up with, you know, whether it be through, you know, an innate amount of research, but most likely just like the way that he saw the character. So that means that there's a lot of actors who have looked at this character and thought, smells like a fish, acts like a puppy, is very strange, I'm gonna crouch. And as the movement director, when I first saw him do it, I said, do you really want to do that? You're gonna do this a lot. You're gonna be in a little bit of pain. Are you sure? And he went, yeah, I'll do it. It's great. I'm sure that he might be cursing that 6 weeks from now, but that's what that is. And then our actors playing Trinculo and Stefano, Caleb Burnham playing Stefano in 12th Night is playing dual Duke Orsino and Malvolio. So for those of you who want to see Caleb do everything he has ever been good at, a Puritan, the lover boy, and the slapstick comedy in one season, all three characters. And then Rain Palmer is actually playing Viola in 12th Night. So they get to share the stage together a whole lot, which is wonderful. And they're a great couple to watch together on stage. And in this production playing Stefano, I think really highlights a lot of the comedy that Rain has grown in excess over the years. If for those of you who came and watched our Shakespeare Out Loud, you got to see Drunken Shakespeare, you got to see her play Lady Macbeth. If you got to see our Macbeth at Imes, then you got to see her play 9 different characters at the same time as a witch. And so, you know, I think that's a wonderful thing to see her do. Do we have any questions in the chat, or Dr. Horn, do you have any questions about the upcoming production that I can answer?
I don't have questions at this point. I was just excited to hear so many of the answers. I love hearing when people are playing Miranda as 15, because making a 15-year-old into a lovely leading lady who is polished is not interesting to me. That's just a little gross. So I like playing into the weird choice that was made.
One of the things that I absolutely really enjoyed and didn't do on purpose at all was, oh, by the way, I don't watch. So when Dr. Horn does these, for those of you who don't know that, I have no idea what's happening. I get the presentation the day before, the day of. I do never have time to look at it. And then I create all of the questions and answers generally as I'm going with the polls and stuff like that. So thank you for everyone who is technically inclined to forgive me for my mistakes. But so when I asked that question about, like, you know, with all of these women playing all of these roles in the Tempest, I had no idea that at one point there were no, you know, the only female role was Miranda, and that was it. And we've got Ashley Freitag playing Antonio. We have Emma Wright playing Sebastian. Oh my God, yes, I got those correct. Okay, good. We have myself playing Ariel. It is not a genderless Ariel. I will say that it is very much my costume being made by our costume designer, Patty Rogers, who is absolutely incredible, is creating a beautiful costume for me that I'm very excited about. And then our Gonzalo is being played by a woman. Oh man, there's so many. So we definitely have a large female cast this year, and some of the actors are choosing to use that in the way that they are playing the characters. And then other ones, it's just playing a character. You know, it is an actor playing a character. Gender isn't accounted for. It isn't considered. It isn't brought up. And, you know, I think as an audience member, the cool thing about that is that you get to decide, does seeing this presentation of a person versus the actions that they're making or the pronouns being used for them. Change the way that you feel about the character that you're watching. You know, purposefully or not purposefully, I think that that can help people point out some
Absolutely.
biases that we might have as humans. And then
And I'll
also
put in a plug for this version that different actors chose those different routes as well. And so I absolutely think that can add extra layers to the play. So I'm really looking forward to this production.
I am too. For those of you who are going to come hang out with us and see Twelfth Night, Twelfth Night is much the same story. So Festy is being played by Hayden Hall, who we have conglomerated into one character. The Fool, Festy, and Fabian are all Hayden. And then Andrew Aguicheek is being played by Ashley Freitag. And so that is a wonderful a thing I never thought. I have known Ashley for 15 years. She pointed out to me that I said 10, she's like 12. And I was like, oh God, I don't know. But never having gotten to see that person play this role, I think it is incredibly wonderful to see the humor and the things being brought to this role being played in that manner. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. We also have Emma in that show is playing Mariah. That's right. I was like, I'm seeing costumes in my head and I'm trying to remember what show I'm looking at. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. And that show also plays with gender so much. You know, Twelfth Night very much is the show that makes everybody go every time, huh? At the end of the show, if you don't know how it ends, playing Olivia, I absolutely have a moment where I go, oh yeah, that checks out. Okay, that makes sense. So it's a lot of fun. I'm excited for you guys to see that and then come up to me afterwards and go, I saw the face. I know when you made it. I know what it is now. So there's a little breadcrumb trail for you to follow. We're out of time. I always have so much fun. I don't want to stop.
The nerdiness about Shakespeare's catching, and I apologize.
It is absolutely catching. And I've truly enjoyed this. For everyone who is still hanging out and watching with us, we're so glad that you are here. If you are enjoying this presentation and you are enjoying the free content that we are working to create for you both online and in person, please consider donating. We are a 501c3. That means that we subsist on your donations. No one is paying Jennifer and I to be here. In fact, there are at least 2 directors who are probably pretty upset right now that I am not at rehearsal. It's fine. They'll be all right. They've got other people to worry about too. But if you are interested and you do have the ability, you can find us on both Venmo and PayPal. Our username is @TennesseeStage, paypal.me/TennesseeStage. And then I will also put another link in the chat on all fronts for everyone to follow should they choose to. There we go. tinyurl.com/donate now. Donate now TSC. I'll have to edit that whenever it publishes. There we go. So please consider doing that if you have the ability. We absolutely would utterly appreciate it. It is the thing that brings us back year after year to continue to bring you shows. I think those are all the things that I am supposed to say. I will see all of you very soon. If you're lucky, we do have 2 matinee performances. That's right. So we do have 2 matinee performances. So if you are a normal fan of the Shakespeare and you like to come see it in the air conditioning inside, we will have 2 matinee performances that will also be at IMES. IMES has a presentation room that we turn into a tiny little theater. The tickets are incredibly limited. So please get them now if you are interested in doing that. And because we have access to that, this show means that when it rains and all of us are excited to go drink, we won't be able to do that anymore because we can do the show inside. So if you are coming to see Shakespeare this year and it is outside, but it looks like it's going to rain, you are welcome to come. If we are not able to play outside, we will move inside if we are able in a timely manner to allow everyone to continue to see the show inside. Tickets for those and positions for those will be limited. So if you do come, it starts to rain and you want to come back, let us know. We'll figure it out. But if you do want to see it and you think it's going to rain, you can still show up downtown, still show up at IMES on Island Home Avenue and come watch us there. Those are all the things that I have to say. Ruth said it's in the mail. Thank you so much, Ruth
Yay,
Horton, one of
thank
our
you.
Bobs. It is in the mail. If it was already in the mail, I checked a check-in the other day. I think it might have been yours. I don't know. I am learning all of the wonderful traits of taking care of a company from our own artistic director, Tom Parkhill, including how to intake checks. I think people my age are probably like, what's a check? People younger than me are absolutely like, what's a check? I have to sign it. But those are all the things I've got for today. Dr. Horn, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, just thank you for showing up and taking some time from a beautiful day to join us talking about Shakespeare. And again, this is the tip of the iceberg. If you want more suggestions or want to talk more, please do send an email to Tennessee Stage. They will get it to me, and I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, then I guess we're out. I'm gonna share my screen with the information in order for everyone to get their tickets of where the performances will be, when the matinees are, and everything. So Dr. Horn and I will see you next year for Shakesology, but I'm sure we'll see you before that for another Shakespeare Out Loud. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you all soon.
Bye. And again, if you want the mock Tempest, email Tom Parkhill.
I definitely put it in the chat. So anyone who is interested, go for it.
Nice.